Let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, abortion. Amid the avalanche of news coming out of the White House, you probably missed what happened on May 5th. The Trump administration asked a federal court to dismiss a case that would restrict access to the drug mifepristone, better known as the abortion pill. Here's the backstory. Medical abortions using mifepristone now account for more than half of all abortions in the U.S. So, pro-life groups have been trying to restrict access to the drug as a way to reduce abortions. Since 2022, they've been waging that battle in federal court. Not surprisingly, the Biden administration was against this effort. But with his decision on May 5th, asking the court to dismiss the case, President Trump has taken the same position as President Biden and against the pro-life activists and conservative evangelicals who've been his most loyal supporters. That is a big deal. To no one's surprise, this isn't getting much attention from conservative media outlets because they want Christians to continue to think that Donald Trump is their champion. But pro-life activists have been screaming about Trump's betrayal of their movement for years. One has called Donald Trump's position pathetic and unacceptable. Marjorie Dannenfelser, the president of a pro-life group, called the administration's view morally indefensible. So let's take a closer look at why pro-life activists are so upset with the president and why so many pro-life voters still support him. Back in 2020, I made an explainer video about abortion that got a lot of attention and a lot of criticism. In it, I looked at the likelihood of overturning Roe v. Wade and whether or not that should be the single issue determining how Christians vote in presidential elections. I cited research that said even if Roe was overturned, at most it would result in a 12% reduction in abortions. Man, did I get pummeled for that. Conservative pro-life evangelicals for Trump called me a heretic, a liberal shill, and even demon-possessed because I dared to second-guess the wisdom of putting all the focus on the Supreme Court and overturning Roe, rather than more pragmatic policies that have proven to reduce abortions by much more. As you know, SCOTUS ultimately did overturn Roe 2 years later, and now the results are in. I will freely admit that I was wrong. Abortions did not decline by 12% as I predicted in my earlier video. That's because they didn't decline at all. They've gone up. Here's one study's conclusion. Following the 2022 ruling in Dobbs, it was generally expected that the abortion rate would drop due to the number of states that rapidly adopted abortion bans, 12 states, and early gestational restrictions, 6 states. Yet, contrary to expectations, recent data show that the number of abortions in the U.S. overall has slightly increased in the 2 years following the Supreme Court ruling. To be fair, we can't really blame Trump for the increase in abortions after the Dobbs decision, because everyone thought overturning Roe would reduce abortions, even Trump's critics. But here's what we can blame him for. After decades of decline, the abortion rate started going up for the first time during Trump's first administration, and that was before the Dobbs ruling. In other words, Trump's own policies resulted in more abortions. And it gets worse. Since taking over the Republican Party, Donald Trump has removed the pro-life language from the party's platform. He has denounced states' bans on IVF, a procedure that strict pro-life activists oppose. In fact, during a Fox News town hall, he vowed to defend IVF and even called himself the father of IVF. And after the Dobbs decision, he said some state bans on abortion were too tough and should be, quote, redone. He said Florida's 6-week abortion ban was a terrible mistake and too severe. And what got pro-life groups really angry was this post on social media. Everyone knows I would not support a federal abortion ban under any circumstances and would, in fact, veto it. So let me ask you, what do you call someone who opposes an abortion ban, who removes pro-life language from their party's platform, someone who believes state restrictions on abortion are a mistake, and whose policies cause the number of abortions to go up? What do you call someone whose administration asks a federal court to throw out a case trying to limit access to the abortion pill? What do you call that kind of person? Well, I'll let him speak for himself.
I'm very pro-choice.
So where does this leave religious voters who held their noses and voted for Donald Trump because of their pro-life beliefs? With Trump now openly advocating pro-choice policies and being denounced by pro-life organizations, you'd think that the Democrats would be eager to add these nose holders to their coalition of anti-Trump, pro-Constitution voters. You'd think they'd make room for some pro-lifers in their party. I asked Senator Gillibrand about this when she came on the Holy Post last month, but she didn't indicate that the Democratic Party was expanding its tent at all. Look, I'm not expecting the Democrats to suddenly take over the pro-life position abandoned by Republicans, but maybe they'd be wise to tone down some of their more extreme pro-abortion rhetoric. After all, most Americans support common sense limits on abortion, including those who are pro-choice. And a huge majority still think abortion is something to mourn rather than something to celebrate. A simple change of tone and a hospitable posture toward pro-life voters could go a long way. Why not return to the rhetoric that the party used in the 1990s when they said abortion should be safe, legal, and rare? Emphasis on the word rare. They could choose to highlight Democratic policies that have been proven to reduce abortions. Policies like paid family leave, Medicare expansion, and more federal aid and tax breaks for adoption. All the while, they could still advocate for a woman's reproductive rights. That's the safe and legal part. But so far, that's not what the Democrats are doing, which in my view is just politically short-sighted. If they really believe that Trump is a threat to democracy and the Constitution, shouldn't they want to build a coalition with as many voters as possible to stop him, including pro-life voters who've soured on Donald Trump, but who still think the Democrats may be too extreme on this issue? The Republican Party is making a bet that pro-life voters will never abandon them, no matter how much they're betrayed and no matter how pro-choice Trump becomes. And so far, that bet is paying off. Because unlike the Republicans, the Democrats remain unwilling to disappoint the most extreme activists in their own party in order to reach more voters. Look, for 40 years, there was a pro-life party and a pro-choice party. But that era is over thanks to Donald Trump. He has effectively neutralized the issue. Today, both major parties are pro-choice, and the Trump administration's court filing on May 5th is just the latest proof of that. There may be other reasons for a Christian to still support this president, but thinking he values life shouldn't be one of them. As Dr. Abby Johnson, a pro-life activist, said, "Hey, pro-lifers, wake up. When people tell you what they believe them."